Good afternoon in New York. It's 5 o'clock p.m. and I am Patricia Angelin speaking to you from Alba Technique. And how do I turn this camera around? There we go. And there you see me, and I do not see you, but that's okay. Today I had intended to speak to you about how to deal with a narcissist if you have it in your life. But just today, 2 questions have come in, and so since this is meant to be something that I don't prepare and that I don't think about in advance, that I just respond to you and to what you need me to do and to ask you and answer about, I will answer those questions first. So the initial question that I have here comes over email, and it is a response to last week's Instagram Live. And the question is, I quote, Patricia, you mentioned last week a friend asking about the experience of deep crying. With your acting experience and your knowledge about the body and emotions, would you say that we all have an endless ability to sob like such, like an endless well of emotion? If we tapped into it, or something like a negative event or built up distress tapped us into it? Okay, that's the question, end quote. Just to remind those of you, or to tell those of you who didn't happen to be with us, the question that the friend had asked, to which the querent is referring, was whether how many times I, in the last 10 to 30 years, have found myself in a dark room, in a corner, on the floor, sobbing my guts out, alone in the dark, in a fetal position. And that was my friend's question. And I didn't answer the question directly as to how many times, because I have had that experience. And I did answer that in the last, I think it was the last Instagram Live, which would be now on YouTube if you want to, talk about it. And I talked about depression. So that is what this querent is referring to today, about the experience of deep crying. I wouldn't say that that's only deep crying, that kind of sobbing that my original question answered. I mean, that is, if it happens as the friend obliquely referred to, like a number of times, that is an indication that if that was happening to me, and it was happening to be frequently or over a period of time, that would be a very clear sign to me that I needed intervention, that simply talking to my friends wasn't enough, and all the things that I had been doing to stay mentally healthy up until that point were not sufficient to the situation I found myself in, that caused me to be curled up into a fetal position in a very, very dark black room in a very, very dark black place. That's the experience of being, of that feeling trapped in a dark hole. And anyone who has that degree of sadness, I think if it recurs more than maybe twice, perhaps, then that is, I need to reach out. I need to call a toll-free hotline. I need to get a reference to a really good psychotherapist who also has good connections with an MD psychiatrist in case I need some chemical intervention. Because if it's not linked to an actual acute event in my life, it means that the depression is causing so many hormones to be released in my brain, in my whole body, that it's bringing me very, very low indeed. So now to go to her question with all of that as a preamble. With my acting experience and my knowledge about body and emotions, would I say that we all have an endless ability to sob like such? Yes, absolutely. I do think that ability is part of the beautiful repository of human emotion, that all of our limbic systems are capable of giving us that experience, and we're going to call it that. We're going to call it a giving of that experience. And any of us who have been to that place, one of the good things that it does for us and for humanity, because, there's a Buddhist saying that if a butterfly flaps its wings in one part of the world, causes a hurricane in another, and that's a way to say that every action that we perform, everything that is in us, in our humanity, that there is no such thing as, well, I can do anything I want because it doesn't affect you. Well, on the higher levels of our energetic existence, everything I do affects you, and everything you do affects me. So if somebody is deeply depressed, they need our help, and we need to do what we can to assist them to be lifted up so they can continue to give of their individual gifts. So yes, querent, absolutely. In answer to that part of the question, we all have this ability. And because it is universal, as painful as it is when we're in it, and as painful as it is for us to find out that a friend is in this or a colleague is in this, and as much as we then feel utterly helpless to really help them, we're not helpless. We can't take it away, though. We have to, in humility, acknowledge that this experience of our friend, of our colleague, of our family member, of ourself, it needs help. It needs what Pope Francis would say, accompaniment. It needs us to assist in small ways, but not to take it on, not to expect ourselves to be able to save the person. We simply assist the person. We listen with deep listening, but we don't solve their problem. That's one of the best things I can tell you. When you have somebody who comes to you with any aspect of depression, please don't try to solve their problem. It's not what they need. They do not need you to fix them, and you probably can't fix it. So lift that off of yourself, that burden internally. And the second part of her question is, like an endless well of emotion, if we tapped into it or something, like a negative event or built up distress, tapped us into it. Well, yes, that is, again, the questions that this querent asks tend to be quite, multi-level. And a negative event, yeah, that can trigger it. Trigger is a word that is sometimes misused these days. It comes out of so many people seeking psychological therapy, and that's a good thing if they're going to a good psychotherapist. And she says, or built up distress. Yes, both. So that is the question. Yes, we both have what I call the Jungian well of emotion, the Jung, Jungian, Jungian well. And Jung, as I may have mentioned in previous sessions, is the major successor student mentee of Freud. And so he's in the early part of the 20th century. And out of Freud and then out of Jung, all of the cognitive behavioral therapies that were engaged in the 20th century rose and grew. Adler, Skinner, et cetera, cognitive behavioral therapies, which are so wonderful. And ultimately, what I mentioned to you last in dealing with really difficult depressions that are recurrent and deep, I would suggest that you find someone who works with psychotherapy from the standpoint of trauma, broadly defined. Not necessarily PTSD as a disorder, but broadly defined trauma. E as in elephant, M as in Mary, D as in dog, R as in Robert. EMDR. You can look it up on Google. It's an excellent therapy. And I have in the past suggested that one or two persons who came to me at Alba Technique and with whom I was working with the Alba Emoting Emotional Effector Patterns, as the information came into me as a master teacher of Alba Emoting, I quietly, privately suggested to, it's only been one or two people in the past decade of my teaching life with this. And I suggested to them that they go away, they take an excellent course in EMDR, and then come back and continue their training, which they did with great success. So it's about observing the self, querent, and accepting that although our emotions are absolutely unique to ourselves, and they're additionally absolutely unique in every moment, because we never step into the same river twice, as the old Eastern wisdom goes. You never step into the same river twice, because the river has changed and you have changed, and where our cells are constantly being renewed, as we know. So that's the answer to the first question that we have. How are we doing for time? We're brilliant. Let me see, is there anything in the chat? My wonderful assistant Katie has given you a link. And I want to greet Eddie McCarthy, who is my good right arm in Ireland. I'm so happy he's here. And Maria Opedisano Nicholas. I hope that you are doing in blooming health, and you know what I'm talking about. And I welcome Richella McCarville, who's watching us, and I don't recognize your name, Ms. McCarville, so I am happy that you are here with us, as well as anyone else who has joined us. And also, if you will be watching us later when we are on the Alba Technique YouTube channel. The second question was asked of me today, live, about 3 hours ago. And this questioner, I don't know whether she knew what I did or not, but she said, Pat, you have a lot of experience. I just lost my cat. I'm incredibly sad. I can't seem to stop crying. Do you have any suggestions as to what I can do to deal with this? So bless her heart, of course she's sad. And she said, like talking about our earlier question, that she just kept sobbing. And almost anything would, as she put it, set her off. Anything will set me off. And I never know when it's going to set me off. Well, the beautiful young woman who questioned me was just under 30 years old, and her cat was 15 years old. So what this means is that this feline companion was with her for half of her life. Came into her life, a beautiful feline being that loved her in a cat way, quite perfectly in a cat way. And as we continue to talk about it, not only was the cat in her life a long time and had a very good life, but it also was, came to her at a particular point in time when she was 14 or 15 years old and having difficulties in late puberty, just turning over into adolescence. So that has to be factored in about how sad she is. But she said, but I don't think I should be this sad, Pat. I don't think I should, because I knew it was coming, because my cat had been sick and I'd been taking her to the vet and we thought it was fixed. And I told myself, it could come at any time. And I told myself about 6 months ago that I was going to lose her. And then she got well and we were able to fix it. And there was a cancer situation that, and then just all of a sudden I said, so the death itself was sudden? Did you discover your cat? She said, no, but she was clearly in a lot of pain. And I had to bring her to the vet. And we had to put her down. And I asked her, when was this? And she said, this weekend. So my response to her question is this, and was this, of course, because this was live. In accompanying her with this, I said her name, and I said, my dear name, this was a companion of half of your life. You are allowed to mourn your loss. This is the kind of a situation, viewers, in which, like the second querent asked me, if something is a negative event, as she put it. This is, or what I have referred to in the past, is an acute situation. This is not something her mind has made up. This is not something that really built up really. This is a natural event of loss of a being who is important in her life. And she is allowed to let the mourning, the grieving take its course. So she says, so what should I do with this? I said, just what you've done with me. With someone whom you know a little bit, they will see, as I did, that there's sorrow behind your eyes. You know, you're looking at me right now. I am feeling sorrowful, and you can see it. You're a sensitive person. The only person who might not see the cues clearly would be somebody who is on the autism spectrum, and that would be okay too. Then it would become even more important if I needed the other person, that person who's somewhere on the Alzheimer, not Alzheimer's, excuse me. Oh, you know what I mean. Like Asperger's, someone who might have Asperger's, and does not, the brain does not read the cues of other people socially as easily. So it would become all the more important to say one of my very dear friends at Asperger's that I actually tell her or tell him that I am sad, and to please give me a little bit of extra, a little bit extra time to process things, because I just lost my cat and it has made me very sad. So you get to say things, you get to talk about this to people, you know, not endlessly. Their experience is not yours, but everybody understands the experience of loss. And my friend here had loss, and she needs to accept that is loss. And the good stuff that will come out of it is that this particular loss, she'll go through it. She will feel sad. She will sob. She will miss her cat in her life, and she will be accompanied by people. She will, you know, have conversations she might not have had otherwise, which will be very good. She will have appreciation for what this small being brought into her life. She will have hope, as I do. Not everyone does, but I do, that in the munificence of the abundance of the divine, that when she dies, that when my friend dies, that her feline friend, in the full glory of her catness, as a cat, as her felineness, will be there on the other side of death, of her human death, and that will be part of her joy. So, you know, and she'll think things through like that. And the best thing is that it will increase her human compassion. This experience of loss of her cat will ultimately increase her compassions for other persons who have experienced loss of pets and farm animals too. Sometimes we can become very attached to farm animals as well. So that is the second question. And another thing that I wanted to share with you today, which is the third thing. I try to do things and either answer one question in depth or deal with three things. And this is something I wanted to share with you because it's uplifting with what we've been talking about today. And you will see right behind me are some hyacinths. Some beautiful hyacinths. And I have to tell you that the smell of these hyacinths is absolutely delicious. And in regards to depression, one, I didn't tell the girl this to do because she's in an acute depression, but if one is dealing with the fact that one is a depressive person or is going through what the second querent said, you know, a building up of stress and distress, this is something that can help you. My great-grandmother Angeline, who was a pioneer twice in her life, first from southeastern Pennsylvania, she was of an Anabaptist Mennonite sect, spiritual tradition, and one of the sects that you would probably be most frequently associated with the Mennonites would be the Amish. So she was an Amish sect called the Church of the Brethren, And she married in Pennsylvania, and then they pioneered to southeastern Ohio, where my grandmother was born, and then they pioneered further out to North Dakota. So this pioneering woman had a lot in her life to deal with. A lot of deaths, a lot of different deaths of different kinds, and floods and prairie fires, and really, really interesting things. But I found a picture of her in her old age, and she was, and in the picture, it was a color picture, and she was, I would say she was about 75 years old in the picture, a white-haired lady, in sort of an elegant gown and an apron, and she was tending 3 different colors of hyacinths in a window box in North Dakota. And clearly she was living with her daughter, my grandmother, at this time. And underneath the picture of her mother, my grandmother had put a quote that she had heard her mother, Angeline, say. And the quote is, if I can remember it, and I'll let you look at the hyacinth while you do this. If of thy worldly goods thou art bereft, and of thy slender store 2 loaves alone are left, sell one, and with a dole buy hyacinths to feed the soul. And so one day when I was depressed many years ago, I live on a block in New York which is called the Flower Block. And it has the last remnants of the old floral district. So the floral district is still here. It's just smaller, especially with COVID, than it used to be. And every year at this time, they put out the hyacinths. And every year I buy myself hyacinths as long as they're there for the scent. Because remember, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. And hyacinths, if you're not allergic to them, obviously, is a very uplifting scent. And so I'm going through my eyes to uplift myself. I'm going through my nose to uplift myself. I'm able to touch them. They have a lovely, lovely waxy, flower, and so many flowers on the head. So many flowers. Isn't this beautiful? So I think that the beauty of it is uplifting. And one of the things, even this one little flower has so much scent in it. So it's an uplift in tough times. Whether it's a tough time because you just lost a cat or a dog, a beloved pet, it's a tough time because of COVID and it's another quasi-lockdown. It's a tough time because one is worried about an elder who's gotten COVID or a young person who's gotten it. And because we never know with this COVID stuff how it's going to progress. It might end up just being similar to having a flu, or it might get worse and worse and worse, and we don't know. So the anxiety of all of that, of how long we've been locked down, of whether we're going to have authorities municipally or statewide or federal governmentally telling us that we have to stay home again. It seems like it's unending. So to be able to go out and walk, I think is a huge thing to do, whether your distress and your sadness is because of an acute event, like her pet dying, or whether one is just in the thing we're all suffering with, the anxiety and the angers as well, and the depression of the COVID, because it's worldwide, and those of us who are sensitive, we feel the pull down of this. So please remind yourself of that this has been going on a long time, and that when you are feeling sad, feeling low, feeling anxious, feeling angry and irritable, that this is a pretty universal. It's having individual manifestations, but it's universal. So go for a walk, and be good to yourself. More fluids, drinking more fluids. More fluids. Raw vinegar with a little honey. Cheers. breathed in through my nose. I drank 5 swallows to have the swallowing mechanism opening my throat and relaxing my throat. And then I breathed out through the mouth. And you saw me do it. This is very good. We need uplift. And then get yourself something visual. And bring it inside. Bring it into your space. So that is why I have these hyacinths. Because I have a lot of financial worries right now. Rather a lot of them. And many of us do. So this would be what the poem is talking about. If of thy worldly goods thou art bereft. Bereft is an archaic word for having things have been taken away. And of the dole. In Ireland, you'd be on the dole. That which is left over is what the original meaning is. That's what's left over. And of the dole, if you have 2 loaves, two loaves of bread, which means you're really getting down to kind of brass tacks or bod base here. And the poem says, sell one of the 2 loaves of bread you have and buy hyacinths to feed your soul, to remind you that there's a cycle of life, to remind you that even though we are in February, and to those of you with SSAD, SAD, seasonal affective disorder, this, you bring it into the house. You bring the flower into your space. You light a candle so that there's a flickering, aliveness, and this will remind you quite subtly. It's not necessarily on the top of your mind, but if you do those things, they give you a little teeny bit of sense of control. And you're also trusting in yourself and in divine providence. Some people say in the universe, but even higher than that is in the divine providence. You're trusting yourself. You're trusting all that is good and beautiful and true, that all shall be well, and all shall be well. Because look at that bulb. That comes from a bulb. The bulb is underground. It's all covered over with earth. It's in the ground. It's in the dark. And many of my city-dwelling friends who haven't been around farms and don't have the understanding that would be patently obvious to anybody who's done any kind of farming at all, or even been on farms, that the winter is not dead, men and women. Things are not dead in the wintertime. They're sleeping. And don't we all need to sleep? So those bulbs were in the ground, in the dark, gaining in strength, pulling in nutrients from the soil so they could flower. And then what you get is this. And it's quite wonderful. And it has its cycle, and it gives off its sweet visual, and it gives off its fragrance, and then it gives back into the ground from which it came. And those of us who are Christians are in the season of Lent, which is a very old word, old English word, which means springtime and preparing for regrowth. So winter is a time of sleeping, a time of calm, a time of growing, but in quiet ways, so that we can ultimately flower and give what is ours to give to other people. And whether that in the ground is a little bit of sobbing, getting rid of the things that we don't need, if we reach out appropriately to each other, if we take a walk, if we hydrate, if we take a nice bath, if we take a good shower, if we light a candle in the darkness, literal and figurative, if we have hyacinths, we will feed our soul, breathing breath, and beholding beauty. And I will turn this around as I leave you so that you can see the beauty of what I started out with, of another candle lit, and of the remnants of a an arrangement that was sent to me that still has dried flowers to give my eyes beauty. So I offer all of that to you. And next Instagram Live, next Wednesday at this time, if questions don't come in from you for me to address, I will address if you have a narcissist in your life and what to do about that. Okay? So here we go, we're turning around. And thank you so much for joining me. Please tell people about us. Tell them they may ask questions, whatever it is. Email if it's private. We won't mention your name. We will address things. And thus we will listen to each other and uplift each other and ourselves during these difficult times. Bless you all. Come again on next Instagram Live. Alba Technique. Here we go. Oops. Take my hand away from the camera. Oh, Patricia. It's Patricia Angelin of Alba Technique thanking you for attending and signing off until next week.